up to him to correct his children. One of the last times I preached, if not the last time here at the church, I brought a message on you don't raise your kids, you train them up. You know, if there's any farmers in here, you raise cattle. You put them out in the field, you look after them from time to time, you make sure they have food and water, you raise them. You don't teach them to do much anything. But children, that's not the case. I don't think anybody in here who has kids brought them home from the hospital, showed them around the house and said, all right, here's the kitchen. Be here at 6 o'clock if you want supper. And here's your room. We're going to put you here. And then at 6 o'clock, you're all sitting at the table. If he was hungry, he would be in here. No, you train your children. Yeah, you have to teach them things in life. And that's one area where Eli was lacking. Secondly, he was their boss. And again, my big issue here goes back to what we read in verse 12 earlier, where they knew not the Lord. They're working in the temple. They are priests. They are supposed to be going before God, and they don't even know Him. Now, we could say that may go back to a parenting issue, because I'll tell you right now, if my kids grow up and they don't know God, it'll be their fault. Because I will do everything I can to lead them to God. But I also know that I can't get them saved. That is between them and God, not between me, them, and God. But it's still my job to try to put them together. But so I believe that is a little bit of a parenting issue. But then as their boss, he probably should have realized, hey, they're not qualified for this. They're doing all these wicked things that we've mentioned, that we've read and we've mentioned, and yet they're still priests in the temple. We know that they were sons of Belial. We know they didn't know the Lord. We knew they were corrupt. We knew He knew everything that they were doing. He knew about their sexual immorality, and He kept on doing that. Now, why is that? Well, I believe, and this is a little bit of the Bible according to Jeremy, that he enjoyed the fruit of his son's sin. In verse 29, we've already read it a couple times, but the end of the verse says, "To make yourselves fat with the chiefest of all the offerings of Israel, my people." We'll read it here in a little bit, but at the end of Eli's life, we find out that he was a heavy man. Now, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but they didn't live in 2022. They didn't have cars to drive around town. Anytime they went somewhere, they were walking. Anything they did required manual labor. I don't believe there were very many overweight people in their time. It was probably a conscious effort to have to be overweight in that time. So if Eli is overweight, and if he is getting fat off of the offerings, which his sons are stealing from the temple, I'm going to go out on a limb, and again, this is the Bible according to Jeremy, and say that he was enjoying the sins of his sons. There's times, to bring it back to a personal illustration, there's times when Joshua does something that I know he shouldn't do, but I find it hilarious. And, as the parent, you're sitting there, you don't want to encourage it because they shouldn't do this, but so you're trying not to laugh. You're covering their mouth because you know that if they see you laugh, they're going to keep doing it because you think it's funny. And that's one of the biggest struggles in parenting that no one warned me about. I gotta say, y'all didn't do a very good job there. Anyway, I'm just kidding. But that is one of the things that we do have to watch out for. Eli was given the okay for their sin. Can I tell you one thing that really bothers me that a lot of parents find hilarious? When a little child says a curse word, and the parents are like, "Oh, that's so funny. I know they shouldn't say it." And that's something that I don't even snicker at it because I'm just like, it's not funny. And maybe you do think it's funny, and our sense of humor just isn't the same. But it's not funny. But parents do this, and they encourage that behavior. And then there's even parents who drink and they leave their alcohol around, and then their kids try a sip of it, and they think that's hilarious, and then they encourage it, all the while causing their child to sin and them to sin. Because again, Eli is a complicated story where it's the sins of the son, but then we also do see the sins of the father in the story. Because the whole time all this is going on, Eli knows exactly what's going on. And he's benefiting from the labor. I believe that Eli may have been lazy. If you will, go ahead and turn with me to chapter 4 of 1 Samuel. In verse 18, it tells us, and this is, we'll read more of the story shortly, but this is the very end of the story. And it says, "And it came to pass, when he made mention of the ark of the Lord, the ark of the Lord had just been taken into the Philistine camp." Let me add that he fell from the seat backward by the side of the gate, and his neck brake, and he died. For he was an old man and heavy, and he judged Israel 40 years. So again, that's where the Bible calls him heavy. I can think of one time when the Bible actually called someone fat, and that would have been Eglon, who was a wicked man. So anytime I've seen a mention to weight in the Bible, it's not a good thing. And so I believe that Eli was probably a pretty lazy man, which would explain the lapses in his parenting. It would explain why he didn't correct his kids like he should have, why he was okay with the status quo, I'm sure that as a parent, he was so excited on the day that they first started to work in the temple. And he said, they'll change. I know they'll change. They'll be around God. Meanwhile, he's still profiting off of their sin, which led to his demise. Again, it wouldn't have been easy for Eli to have been overweight in this day, because, again, today it's a lot easier, because if I were to ask for a raise of hands, how many people work manual jobs or manual labor jobs, I don't think that many people would raise their hands. There are a few of us in here. I tell people that's how I keep my weight off. Sleing a weed eater in 100-degree weather, it does wonders for your weight loss. But anyway, but today it's a whole lot easier because we have desk jobs, we have cars. I've heard people with smartwatches talk about how it's a challenge to see how few steps they can walk in a day instead of how many steps, which is kind of the reverse role that it's supposed to be. But it happens. But a lot of the things here point to Eli being lazy. And the Bible does say quite a bit on laziness. In the book of Proverbs, Solomon tells his son to go to the ant and consider the ways of the ant, because if you wanted to search the earth high and low for a hardworking creature, I don't know that you would find any species on earth that works harder than an ant. They really are fascinating. And as a kid, I can remember getting out and watching them carry this food that is bigger, like 100 times their size, and they're just carrying it back to their colony. So the Bible often does condemn laziness, which is again one of the sins of the father, which probably affected his parenting, which led to his sons committing these horrible sins, and eventually led to their demise. Let's go ahead and read about the price of sin. If you're still in 1 Samuel 4, let's back up to verse number 3 to get the whole story. And we'll read 3 through 18. It says, "And when the people were come into the camp, the elders of Israel said, Wherefore hath the Lord smitten us today before the Philistines? Let us fetch the ark of the covenant, the ark of the covenant of the Lord, out of Shiloh unto us, that when it cometh among us, it may save us out of the hand of our enemies. So the people went to Shiloh, that they might bring from thence the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, which dwelleth between the cherubims. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant. And when the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel shouted with a great shout, so that the earth rang again. And when the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, "What meaneth the noise of this great shout in the camp of the Hebrews?" And they understood that the ark of the Lord was come into the camp. And the Philistines were afraid, for they said, "God is come into the camp." And they said, "Woe unto us, for there hath not been such a thing heretofore. Woe unto us, who shall deliver us out of the hand of these mighty gods? These are the gods that smote the Egyptians with all the plagues in the wilderness. Be strong and quit yourselves like men, O ye Philistines, that ye be not servants unto the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Quit yourselves like men and fight." I've always found that little bit of the story interesting because, again, they're breaking more of God's commandments and saying, let's take the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, let's take it into battle with us. Let's use God as a good luck charm. And let me tell you, if that doesn't describe the society that we live in today of using God as a good luck charm, I don't know what does. So many people want to treat God like he's a genie. Like, you rub the bottle and out pops God. And all right, you get 3 wishes. You make your wish, you put him back in, you go and you live your life however you want to, and then you fall on another hard time, you get the bottle back out. But that's not how God works. And the Philistines were afraid because of what they thought was about to happen. They were afraid because they knew everything that had happened in Egypt. With the teenagers, we're going through the book of Joshua, and we're getting close to the Battle of Jericho. And I love that whenever the 2 spies are in Rahab's house in Jericho, she tells them, she says, we've heard what's happened all the way to here, and our hearts melted. So for 40 years, while the children of Israel were wandering in the wilderness because they wouldn't take the land, they have been scared to death, the children of Israel. Now, the Philistines didn't just roll over and lay down. Let's keep reading. Verse 10. And the Philistines fought, and Israel was smitten, and they fled every man into his tent. And there was a very great slaughter, for there fell of Israel 30,000 footmen. And the ark of God was taken. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were slain. There's part of the price of sin. And there ran a man of Benjamin out of the army, and came to Shiloh the same day, with his clothes rent, and with earth upon his head. And when he came, lo, Eli sat upon a seat by the wayside watching, for his heart trembled for the ark of God. Can I just pause right there mid-verse for a second? Eli knew that the ark of the covenant of the Lord was not supposed to go to battle. But in everything we just read, again, I don't see him trying to stop it. And he's worried to death about it, but he did nothing to try to stop it. There's going to be times in our lives where we're faced with very difficult things, where we're going to have to be uncomfortable. Whether it's in parenting or there's something going on, some sin that either you're dealing with in your life or someone else is struggling with, and you're going to have a choice. And apparently Eli's choice was to let his sons continue sinning, and then to let the Ark of the Covenant go out of Shiloh to the battlefield where it was taken, because he was afraid to do anything, even though he feared it. Continuing in verse 13. And when the man came to the city and told it, all the city cried out. And when Eli heard the noise of crying, he said, "What meaneth the noise of this tumult?" And the man came hastily and told Eli. Now Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were dim that he could not see. And the man said unto Eli, I am he that came out of the army, and I fled today out of the army. And he said, What is there done, my son? And the messenger answered and said, Israel is fled before the Philistines, and there hath been also a great slaughter among the people. And thy 2 sons also, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God is taken. And it came to pass, when he made mention of the ark of God, that he fell from his seat backward by the side of the gate, and his neck brake, and he died. For he was an old man and heavy, and he judged Israel 40 years. There's a lot in those verses that we read that describe what the price of sin was. Again, the sin that we've been discussing are Eli's shortcomings, which led to his son's sins, which led to bad management in the house of God, which led to the Ark of the Covenant being taken into battle, which led to the Ark of the Covenant being taken because they lost the battle. And then in verse 10, we found out that 30,000 footmen died. 30,000 footmen died, including Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. Now, there are certain things I believe that are unnatural for a parent. One of those things is the death of a child. Yes, it happens, but I still say it's unnatural.